Today on the podcast, my guest, Jonathan McLernon from the Freedom Nutrition Coach, Lose Weight, Love Life, and Never Diet. Coach John helps people overcome their challenges in weight loss and take better care of themselves. He's a new dad, and a husband. Welcome on the podcast, Jonathan.
Hey, thanks very much for having me.
You're a new dad, and we
I
just
am.
talked about a second ago. So
Yeah.
I'm a little bit further away now. My son's 8, but what is it like taking care of yourself and also taking care of a newborn? Because that could be very challenging because there's no sleep. You work on
Yeah.
his schedule, not yours, and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges is like you don't have a lot of control over I don't have a lot of control over his schedule. Like we try to get his sleep into a bit of a pattern, but as any parent probably knows, like it's not a science. You can't These kids aren't robots. They have and it seems like we have a bit of a night owl. He seems to really come alive at night, and hey, that's exactly how my wife is, and so it doesn't really surprise me. So yeah, it's I think showing grace and just being like, you know what, some things are just going to fall by the wayside for the time being, and that's okay.
Well, yeah, I remember being a new dad one time way back when, and not getting sleep. Thank God for my son's mother, but and that challenges as a new dad. Sometimes you're like, oh man, I wish I did this, I wish I did that, and and people give you all this advice, but you know what? They're not in your shoes. They don't understand. You gotta be
Yeah.
there. You gotta be in the moment.
Yeah. For me, I really just wanted to be in the game, and I love the name of this podcast. And actually, I've said to people like I don't want to be a sideline dad. And as we're talking about before we started recording, like I say, my wife handles the input, so whenever possible, I'm trying to handle the output. I want to make sure I'm on the diapers. That's getting me face to face contact time with them. Sure, poopy diapers aren't like the most fun thing in the world, but really I'm not that bothered by it. I'm like, I get to tickle him, play with him, blow raspberries on his tummy, and just have that quality face-to-face interaction, and that's just a really special time.
Well, it's interesting too is when you're a very brand new dad, change the diaper the very first time, and he does. I mean, uses the bathroom, and those things can be, oh, whoa, what's that? It can be a little traumatizing, but
Yeah.
but after a while, you're like, this is nothing.
I
Like a
think.
few months, you're into it. You're like, nothing.
Oh yeah. I mean, I wonder if I've changed like probably more than 500 at least. It's amazing. We started out, we wanted to try and use like more sustainable diapers, and kind of, we didn't want to go the cloth diaper route because there's a lot of water consumption that goes with that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so we thought maybe the next best thing is sort of the more biodegradable, sustainable type diapers. And truth be told, he just blew them out one after another, and we were just end up washing more and more clothes. We're like, well, you know what? It's a tough choice to make because I'd rather, so we kind of switched up. During the daytime, we'll use some of the more sustainable type diapers. Nighttime, we're just going to use some of the good old standbys that we know hold things together through the night.
Well, it's funny as a dad myself. I remember my son like, "You might get this Huggy." No, just get the name brand. Perfect, works great.
Yeah.
You don't want to traumatize the kid. You want to keep some things consistent. No traumatizing.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I bring on tonight, you have an interesting background tonight, and about weight loss and nutrition, and talk about trauma. I know you had some trauma in your life.
Yeah. So about 11 years ago, or 10 and a half years ago, I guess it would be, I was living down in South Africa. So my wife and I spent some time traveling around the world. We spent about 3 years, this is pre-kids, of course, just living out of a suitcase and kind of having this globe-trotting adventure. And I'm so glad we did. But down there, I was attacked by 4 men and nearly beaten to death. And so that was a really hard experience to go through, because I don't think anything really prepares you for that in life. And I didn't deal with the fallout of it very well. I didn't turn to drugs or alcohol. That's a common thing that happens is when people after trauma, drugs and alcohol represent a type of escape. For me, I turned to food. And I said I was using food to kind of change the channel in my head to suppress or escape what I was feeling. If I could just eat enough and keep eating for long enough, I could just sort of push down, the thoughts and the experiences that I was having after the event.
What was interesting too about it's almost like binge eating in a way, in the sense to cover.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm always hungry, always trying to suppress memories or suppress
Yeah.
feelings. Like people go through traumas, like they have the big traumas and the small traumas, and
Yeah.
in trauma in life. Like I can remember growing up when my stepfather used to get mad because the food wasn't right, and all of a sudden you throw the food across the room, or oh, you will make comments like some parents make comments like call your kid fat,
Yeah.
all those bad names and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's what we would call like little T and big T trauma. And the one thing I say is like trauma is not a contest.
Mhm.
It's because trauma is trauma. There's changes that just fundamental changes that happen in the brain as a result of it. And so sometimes people would listen to what happened to me and go, "Oh, that's nothing. You should hear what happened to so and so." And I go, "This isn't a contest. Like that's not what this is about. Something happened, and as a result, something changed." And you mentioned like binge eating, and yes, I was a binge eating food addict. That's kind of what this turned into for me, and then it led to significant weight gain.
How do you know when you're a food? I mean, obviously, food addict, but how do
Yeah.
you know when you're a food addict? Because I know what it means, but I'm not really sure how to define it.
Yeah, and you know what, I try to be careful about the use of that term because maybe the byproduct of addiction to food is a little bit less severe than say alcohol addiction or narcotic drug addiction. And so, but it's I would say when you are using food, you're in a way that is extremely unhealthy. So maybe you're hiding food, you are eating in secret. Um, Anytime you feel any kind of emotion, you're turning to food, especially if it's a difficult emotion. Um, and then, but not only that, there's the eating episodes where you feel like you're not really in control in that situation. Like there's this compulsive desire to eat that even like I would know that this isn't helping me. This isn't helping my health, my weight, but I couldn't seem to stop it from taking place.
It's almost like a bag of potato chips. I'm thinking a
Yeah,
bag of chips. I'm just gonna have a few. I'm just gonna have a few, and next thing you know, the whole bag is gone.
yeah. So I would say that this is exacerbated or made more difficult by the food environment that we live in. So, a lot of manufactured food products are deliberately engineered to have, I would say, an addictive quality to them. In other words, even for the average person, they're intended that you would start eating them and just feel a small compulsion to, and it's difficult to stop, especially if you eat distracted. So if you eat a bag of chips in front of Netflix, you're going to go to the bottom of the bag. They did a study with this where they went to like a movie theater. They they gave people differing sizes buckets of popcorn, but it was stale, like 3-week old popcorn, and it didn't matter what the size of the bucket was. Whatever they got, people ate to the bottom of it.
Was interesting too. That's one of my biggest things. Yeah, you try to avoid that much as possible. Good example is I know the iced coffee with the swirl in it, but people go to they always the matter the coffee shop it's always packed.
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, caffeine itself is addictive, and I'm now a caffeine abstainer or teetotaler, I guess we could call it. And some people wonder how do you do it and be a parent. And I guess I just do now, because I part of the fallout of trauma was also dealing with anxiety, and so I had to stop using caffeine because that became a trigger. Um, but something like a frappuccino or an iced coffee, like they're very carefully made to cause a dopamine hit in the brain. So dopamine is that neurotransmitter in your brain, that chemical that makes you feel pleasure, and that's what they're designed to do, to keep you coming back for more. Man, it felt really good to drink that coffee. I want more of it, and then we start to then these cravings start to show up. Just out of the blue, you'll drive past say a Starbucks or whatever, and you go,
Mhm.
"Oh man, I'd really like one of those frappuccinos right now." You know, you don't need it. You're not hungry, but there was a trigger that reminded you that drinking that drink in that location felt really good.
Well, it's interesting you said that because an iced coffee and a glazed stick, and it always gives me that I have it. It feels good.
Yeah.
It goes good with, and you like every time you drive by, you have that same feeling of the glazed stick and the iced coffee with the caramel swirl.
So
Not the greatest thing for me, but
oh
I
yeah, yeah.
understand that feeling.
The glazed stick. So is that like a
Donut.
donut type thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so you think about even a donut. That's a really pleasurable thing to eat. And I deliberately use the word pleasure because pleasure and happiness are two different parts of our brain.
Mhm.
So, but you think about it, it's you bite into it. There's the glaze on there, so you get a hit of concentrated sugar. I'm just picturing it right now. There's that sweetness. Maybe they put a little bit of cinnamon or nutmeg or some kind of flavoring on there. So, ooh, there's a little bit of novelty there. So a little bit, and then but then it's soft and it's chewy. Like that texture feels really pleasant. You swallow it very easily. Like there's very little effort to consume it. So it's just a very enjoyable eating experience.
Yes, I agree with that. Well, interesting too is you lost 100 pounds, and that's
Yeah.
impressive in itself. How did you do that?
Yeah, like it's funny. I was just gonna say that's the question that everybody asks is how did you do it? I think the answer people would like to hear is, oh, well, I just I cut out sugar, I exercise 5 days a week, and la di da di da, right? Some sort of simple step by step plan. But the truth is, it was really difficult, and it took me a number of years. I was a classic yo-yo dieter, so because of like the trauma and how I became like a binge eating food addict, I would I would try to lose the weight, but the problem was I wasn't addressing the real cause why I was eating, and so I could only sort of hold that off for so long before I would break down and binge again. And it wasn't until I hired a coach who worked with me and helped me to, I guess we could say, repair my relationship with food, and by extension kind of repair my relationship with myself and my body, because for a period of time I really started to hate myself and hate my body because I felt so insecure about how I looked, about being obese, and I really started to despise it. And so it was when we worked to kind of correct that relationship with myself, with my body, and with food, that I was able to no longer use food to mask difficult emotions and no longer just basically abuse food. So I would say, really, in a nutshell, the secret was repairing my relationship with myself and with food with the help of a really excellent coach.
How many diets do you think you've tried? I know you talk about.
Well, there's kind of two answers to that because there's times where I've tried the same diet more than once.
Mhm.
Um, and a diet, just to define it for anybody who might be listening, we could look at it like it's like a temporary set of behaviors or rules that you follow in an attempt to get a result. The idea being you just temporarily suffer until you lose the weight and then you go back to living your life. And of course, the truth is that never works. I will have tried, in terms of named diets, like paleo, primal, which is slightly different, keto, vegan, raw food vegan, if it fits your macros, which is another type, flexitarian, blue zone eating. Um, yeah, so I've probably tried close to a dozen diets and on multiple occasions. And ultimately, because of the work I do as a nutrition coach, I think that experience is really helpful because it's kind of made me into what I would call a nutrition agnostic. In other words, if somebody comes to me and says like, "I want to be a vegan," cool. I'm going to help you do it in the most healthy way possible. I'm not going to say to you, "No, you shouldn't be a vegan," because I currently strive to be what's known as an ethical omnivore. So I'm
Mhm.
just starting to get into kind of nose to tail eating, trying to eat more organ meats and just other parts of the animal besides just muscle meat. But I'm not going to criticize someone for being a vegan in the same way that I don't think a vegan should criticize me for being an omnivore. I'm going to say, let me help you do this in the healthiest fashion possible.
Interesting too is the fact that also coming from a position. Sometimes you have nutrition coach who are like super gym rats, never been
Yeah.
100 pounds overweight, and they're telling you, yeah, just work out this. This is the program right here. But coming from your position of losing 100 pounds in your experience, how does it help you to help others?
Oh, it dramatically changed how I work with people. If you were to meet me before, like pre-trauma, I would have just said people who were overweight were lazy and undisciplined because I didn't know any different. For me, it wasn't that hard to stay in shape because I lived an active lifestyle. I was athletic. I enjoyed being active and so on. Once I became obese, all of a sudden my eyes were open to how difficult it actually is. And so a lot of my clients hire me like, look, I don't look like a fitness model. I got some loose skin. I had a lot of extra weight. It's there for life. I don't anticipate ever having surgery to remove it. It's just kind of a reminder of what I once was. Um, And so in saying that, I know, like, you can't read a book about this stuff. When somebody comes to me, I know kind of in a heart to heart way what it is they're feeling And so I can have a lot more empathy towards them instead of just being like, "Hey, just follow the rules, dummy." Like that's not coaching and that doesn't work.
Almost like they can relate to you better. I think there's also
Yeah.
too, because you've been there, you know what the struggles are. You understand their point of view.
Yes. And I also hired coaches who weren't very helpful for me. And so I also understand what bad coaching feels like, more importantly, what it feels like to be shamed by someone who looks so much better than I do physically and made to feel less than. And, when somebody doesn't know how to work with a person who is struggling, they will often try to use like coercion. It could
Mhm.
be shame, it could be guilt, like just, oh, come on, you can do better than this. And they try and dress it up like, I believe in you. But it's like you're missing the point of this. You're not really understanding the root cause of the behavior. And so I kind of have coined my approach of coaching now. I call it brain driven weight loss.
Mhm. What is that?
Well, I think I want to acknowledge that the primary driver of our behavior is the brain. So let's just say you're struggling with nighttime eating. Yes, what you're eating is unhealthy, but why are you eating at night? Well, we could look at things like, what are your stress levels like? What are you feeling in your brain? Where are you being like mentally taxed throughout the day? Because we have the front part of our brain called the prefrontal cortex. That's kind of like the logical part of the brain where we think about our behaviors and go, do I want to do this? Right. But then we have the kind of the back part of our brain, which is more primal, we would say. And it's more like, I want to feel good and not feel pain. It's in one sense, it's kind of simpler. So we have at the end of the day, we're a lot more tired. And so our brain kind of, I would say, pushes the responsibility back to the more primal part of our brain that says, I want to eat for pleasure. So when we look at, okay, what's happening in the brain that's causing these behaviors to occur? The other part of it is like, I wonder if you've ever driven from like one place to another and you get there and you don't remember driving there. Has that ever happened
Yeah.
to you?
Yes, actually has.
Yeah. And you go, oh my gosh, like how did I get here safely? What the heck? It's almost like frightening in one sense. But what happened was your brain just took over and did that on autopilot because it'd done it so many times. That's actually really cool in one sense. Because we can take healthy behaviors, and if we practice them enough times, if we build a practice of these healthy behaviors, we can actually start to automate them where we don't have to think so much about it. We just kind of do it, and healthy living becomes automatic. And so I try to help people in kind of I would call it like a reverse engineering way. So instead of dumping a bunch of rules on people, I say, you and I are going to work together in a step by step fashion, piece by piece, and we're gonna reverse engineer your healthy lifestyle. But you're going to be an active participant in this as well, because I want you to feel empowered in this process, not like you're just following the rules because I'm telling you to do something.
What do you think? Well, I'm thinking about something I'm reading, and I'm thinking about. Do you think sometimes our brain holds us back though? Like, hey, you're not good enough. Why are you
Oh,
doing this?
oh yeah, man, 100%. So how about I give you a bit of a picture here, and I think maybe this will illustrate a little bit of sort of like three different facets to what it is we're up against.
Hmm.
So, do you have a particular like a vice or like a food that you struggle to like regulate your consumption?
We'll say the glazed donut.
Okay, so we'll pick on glazed donuts, but it really could be anything, right? So let's just say um, you're kind of feeling stressed out. You're driving home from work, and you just go, "Oh man, I just really want one of those glazed donuts."
Hmm.
And you go and get the glazed donut, and your brain lights up like a Christmas tree and goes, "Whoa, that was awesome!
Huh.
I don't feel stressed anymore." Well, your brain just learned a trick, in a sense. It learned, when I feel stressed, I eat a glazed donut and I feel better. Now, our brain, some people call it lazy. I call it efficient. Your brain goes, cool, I want to remember that trick, because every time I feel stressed, if I just eat a glazed donut, I feel better. So that starts this pattern of behavior. The problem is a bit of a side effect of eating like this, and that is it will gain extra weight. So then we go, oh my gosh, this is a problem. Um, I need to stop eating glazed donuts altogether because they're causing me to gain weight. You take that away, and the next time you're stressed, your brain goes, where's the glazed donut? Right. So now a craving develops. And eventually that craving gets stronger and stronger and stronger until you feel as though the only way this is going to stop is to eat the glazed donut. Once you eat it, Bingo, you're back at square one. I feel stressed. I eat a glazed donut. I feel better, right? So we're back to the first loop. So now the third piece of the puzzle is this: we use a story or a narrative to explain our behavior. So we want to try to make sense of what's happening here. So we might actually say something like, I'm addicted to glazed donuts. That is our explanation for our behavior. It also kind of, in one sense, lets us off the hook a little bit, right? Like, well, I'm in the grips of an addiction. It holds power over me. It sort of gives us a bit of an out, right? But if that's the story we tell ourselves, our brain will try to reinforce that story. So it will, because our brain has this primal, I guess you would call it like a security mechanism or a security urge where it's like, I want to keep this reality as stable as possible so I can keep you safe. If it's familiar, I can keep you safe. So you say I'm addicted to glazed donuts. Well, every time you pass by a glazed donut, what does an addict do? They're going to eat one, you know?
Exactly.
And so now this kind of sense of identity, this story piece or this identity piece begins to direct your behavior as well. And because you know, this is kind of how your brain starts to hold you back, right? Is I started to identify, for example, as the jolly fat guy. Well, if that's who I think I am, I'm going to start behaving in in congruence with that sense of identity. What does the jolly fat guy do? Well, the jolly fat guy just like eats and eats and eats and always accepts food when someone gives it to him and pretends that he likes to be the fat guy and so on. So I would behave in congruence or in alignment with that part of my identity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like when you go over the cookout and say, "Hey, so and so, you're here. No problem cleaning up the rest of the food here," and stuff like that.
Yes. Bingo, man. You hit it right because I was nicknamed the garberator. Like that's yeah. Hey, we got some extra ribs left over. Hey, John, you'll clean this up, right? You know, that's what it became. And because food, so it was kind of this double whammy because I had this identity as a jolly fat guy. But on top of that, food played this role in my life where it was helping me to escape from my difficult emotions, my relationship with myself and so on. And so it really it kind of compounded on top of itself. And so that's what made like the weight loss such a struggle for me. And so when people say like how long did it take you to lose 100 pounds, I'll tell them 6 years. Now I'll put a caveat in there though and say if I knew then what I know now, it wouldn't take me 6 years. But I had to go on this like struggle, this journey of trying to figure this out and failing so many times to get to this place now.
It's interesting too. I'm thinking about why people sometimes are afraid of change. Why they
Mhm.
can't go through this. Like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll start Monday. I'll start on the first of the month, and then and it never happens.
Yeah, man, you have some really good, like really thoughtful insights here. You're bang on again. We fear change. Again, it's part of our primal brain trying to keep us safe. So, but maybe I could explain it another way as well. Our like primal brain wants to keep us comfortable and doesn't want us to be uncomfortable. And so, if we could sit on the couch and push buttons on our smartphone and have all our needs met, hey, we've done it. We have reached the top of the evolutionary chain because we have what's called a famine biology. In other words, we have a biology that's wired to store fat and conserve energy and move as little as possible because that allows us to stay alive when food becomes scarce. The problem is in the Western world, at least in first world countries, food is not scarce. And we have this 24/7 abundance of food. So there's this tension of this brain, this primal brain that goes, I want to eat and store fat and not move. The other part of us, in my language, I would call it we have a soul. We have
Mhm.
something in us, a sense of who we are as a human being that goes, I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to develop, you know, and being a dad, I mean, gosh, that man, you know, like that awakens something in us where we're like, I want to be a better man because now I have this life that I'm influencing. So but to grow, we have to be willing to be uncomfortable. And so I say, I like my emotionally compelling reason, because that's what we need. We need a reason that we're willing to be uncomfortable because the reward is greater than the discomfort. So I look at my son and he's 7 months old and he hasn't fully figured out this crawling thing yet. He can kind of go backwards, but he tries to move both his legs at the same time to go forward, and it doesn't quite work. And I'm like, good, hold off, kid, hold off, because once you start, because he is a nonstop mover. Like in the womb, he was doing 120 kicks an hour.
Yeah,
Like
wow.
my wife, like almost never, like it was so hard for her to sleep because he just would not stop moving. It comes out, same thing. And so I say he's not a snuggler, he is a struggler. He has to face outward. Like if I try to hold him and snuggle him, it's not that he doesn't love me. He smiles when he sees me, but he'll wrestle and wrestle and wrestle until he's facing outward, and then he kicks his legs nonstop. Well, that's kind of my, not premonition, but like this is what's waiting for me. Is this kid is going to be like running everywhere as soon as he figures out these things. He's going to be going everywhere. I have to be reasonably fit and active if I don't want to be on the sideline. And so that's my. So let's say I go to Costco and I see this big old bag of chips. You were talking about this potato chips. So this big old bag of Maui sweet onion potato chips. This is
Oh,
purple
that sounds
bag,
good.
and oh yeah, oh yeah. And I walk past it, and look, the truth is, even though I've lost the weight, like it's not like all the urges disappear, right? Let's be real. So I walk past it, and my brain goes, "Hey, John, would you
Mhm.
want to eat that entire bag of chips?" It's kind of devious like that. And I'm like, oh man, I would really enjoy it. And that's true. I would actually, in the moment, enjoy eating those chips. But then I look at my son and I go, hang on a sec. If I eat those chips, if I go back to being that person, I'm going to gain the weight back really fast. Because the trick is, fat cells are the gift that keeps on giving. Once you make a fat cell, it stays in your body. You shrink it and you empty it, but it's there waiting to be refilled. And that's why weight regain happens so quickly, because that's our body's energy efficient process. Anyway, I don't want to get too sidetracked in fat cells, but the point being, in order to keep going on my own health journey, I need a powerful reason to do it and be willing to be uncomfortable. And for me, that reason is my son.
It's almost like the psychology behind everything. It's
Yeah.
more about your mind than it actually is the food. I mean, the food
Yes.
is probably important too, but I mean, it's the mind that you really need to take control of.
Yeah. I think it's really important to have an awareness of what we're up against. And so I have a program called Lifestyle 180. It's this 180-day program, and it's meant we do exactly that. What I talked about, we reverse engineer healthy lifestyle. In there, I talk about a hero mindset. Now, it's a pretty deliberate choice of word, because I say we kind of have a choice to be a hero or a victim. So a victim says, I don't have the power to change, therefore I'm going to remain stuck. That's that brain telling us a story why we can't change. But a hero says, despite the obstacles, I'm going to move forward. Now, I made it into an acronym, of course, because I like acronyms. It's healthy, so healthy habits and behaviors. The E stands for educated, so know what you're working with and know what you're up against. The R stands for relentless, and that doesn't mean pedal to the metal. It just means you don't quit, right? And then the O means offense. So you can't sit back and wait for someone to come save you, because that's not going to happen. You know as well as I do, our medical system is overwhelmed. There's
Mhm.
triage. It's underfunded. It's mismanaged. It's bureaucratic and bloated, and so on. Nobody's coming to save you. There's no pill coming to save you. There's no surgery coming to save you. You have to be proactive in your health. And so we talk about adopting a hero mindset.
It's almost like watching a movie in a sense.
Yeah.
You hear her hero's journey and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What other stuff they do? You guys do cover in this the lifestyle 180.
Uh, well, I would say what we do is, so the fundamental principles of a healthy lifestyle are not overly complicated. I think the diet and fitness industry, and in trying to sell people new programs every 3 months, makes it a lot more complicated than it needs to be. We could say primarily you want your nutrition to be, mostly lean protein, quality vegetables, not too much junk food. You want to get decent quality sleep. You want to manage your stress as best as possible. And you want to be active. So if those are the kind of the core principles, and we can obviously dive deeper under each one of those sort of umbrellas, but those are the core principles. So then we're going to say, okay, how do we make this work for you? So for example, one of the skills I'll work on is called EMS, eliminate mindless snacking. And so what I want people to do is to not snack between meals. Now that's a bit of a tricky one, because snack culture is like ubiquitous, is everywhere. And so I'm asking people not to do that. Now, it doesn't mean they have to do it for the rest of their life, but I say, I want you for 2 weeks to try and do this. And then what we're going to figure out here in the 2 weeks of trying to do this is, can you? Do you want to? What makes, what makes it difficult for you, and can you make this work? Now, there's always more than meets the eye. So
Yeah.
when we get rid of the snacking, a couple of really cool things happen. One, we become more what I would call metabolically flexible. So because we have a little bit more space between the times that we eat, we become more efficient at switching between burning carbohydrates and burning fat for fuel. So we become, I call it dual fuel. So that is, we create maybe 4 hours, maximum 6 hours, other than when you're sleeping at night, between the times that you eat. That gap allows us to go from burning carbohydrates to burning fat. So we get a little more metabolically efficient. The second thing is most snack food is going to spike your blood sugar. Like even if you're eating like chips or crackers, something that's savory, in metabolic terms, you're basically eating sugar,
Mhm.
and you spike your blood sugar, and then it crashes, and you have an energy crash. Well, instead, what we do is we say, if you want to have a treat, put it at the end of a meal. Now, your meal is probably going to have proteins, vegetables, quality carbohydrates. So you've had a nutritious meal. Now you're eating this treat just to enjoy it. You don't have to have any guilt, but because you're already like satiated or satisfied from eating a meal, you're not eating this snack or this treat to satisfy your hunger. So, excuse me, you're less likely to overeat it. So that's just like one principle, right? And
Mhm.
I always tell my clients, there's no test on this, but just I want you to understand why we do this. It looks really simple. I want it to be simple because if we make it too complicated, it's too hard to stick to. But know that there's a little more than meets the eye. There's usually a little bit of magic happening in here when we incorporate this.
What are some success stories, some kind of feedback you've gotten from the course?
Yeah. Um, I've had clients lose anywhere from 20 to 30 pounds to 50, 60, 75, 80 pounds. And this is kind of over about a 6 month span usually because it's 180 days. So, but I want to be upfront as well and say that not everybody who joins the program necessarily sees the weight loss they're wanting to achieve. And, I think when you would look at marketing for health and weight loss programs, everyone wants to show you their highlight reel and go, look at this. This is what's possible for you. But what I can't do for people is I cannot force them to do anything. And so if people don't like actively participate in the program, they're not going to see the results they're hoping for. But the truth is, if people apply it, um, it's not unusual to see anywhere from 30 to 70 pounds weight loss over that period of time.
Is anybody you come across and coach that really excited you from the results?
Uh, is- Sorry, could you ask that question once more?
I was wondering if from coaching,
Yeah.
anybody who coached that really excited you, like, hey, that was
Oh, yeah.
awesome from your results.
Yes. One of my favorite clients, she is now 61 years old and she lost 50 pounds. And so this started, she was about 180 pounds, but she's like 5 foot nothing. So that's quite a lot of
Mhm.
weight to carry on a small frame. She was in pain everywhere she walked. It was painful to walk from the main. She works at a bank, and it's painful to walk to her office from the front entrance of the bank and walk and so on. And so to go from that to now she's able to walk 5 miles a day. She's able to swim 30 laps at her local pool, and she said she feels 20 years younger. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is so amazing. And I often cite her as an example because many people would think, I'm 40 something, I'm 50 something, even in my 60s, I'm kind of over the hill. And it's like, no, you're not. It might be a bit more work, partly because we have to unwear, more decades of old behavior patterns, but it certainly is possible.
Well, it's interesting too. Once you get over the age of 40 and 50 and 60 years old, if you don't start keep moving, taking care of yourself, when you get to be 65, 70, 75, you could be in serious trouble.
Yeah, I would say like your mobility is your independence and freedom. So, for example, my mom, she struggles with her, I think it's osteoarthritis in her hip, and she's 73. And so that means that she's not as mobile as she used to be, and she has to rely on other people to help her, sometimes go up and down stairs and so on. And so it's like a loss of freedom, and it's at a really vulnerable time of life. And so if you don't take care of this, you're absolutely right. Your freedom to be independent is kind of eroding day by day. But again, I was like, put some hope in there. There was actually a really cool book written, I don't know, maybe like 10 or 12 years ago. It was called Younger Next Year.
Mhm.
And the premise behind it was, even though you can't stop the clock from ticking, if you start proactively caring for your health, you can become biologically younger than you presently are, because we have what's known as, say, biomarkers of health. It could be like your strength, your physical ability to, lift things, how much muscle or lean body mass you carry, what your body fat percentage is, your bone density, and your basal metabolic rate. So how many calories you burn at rest. So if we didn't know your chronological age, like if I didn't know how old you are, I could assess you on these 5 biomarkers and then kind of compare it to a population average and estimate how old you are biologically. And so what's interesting is last time I did this, I think I came up as about 6 years younger than my chronological age, which is pretty
Oh,
neat.
that is
Yeah.
pretty neat. It's pretty neat to figure out because because it's just really neat to figure out, I guess. You
Well,
also do have a podcast called Wellness Unplugged with Coach John McLernon.
yeah.
How was that for you?
I really enjoy it, and I'm relatively new to podcasting, but I'm not necessarily new to broadcasting. And Wellness Unplugged, it has kind of 2 parts to it. One, obviously, is the published audio episodes that you can listen to, but the other part of it is there's actually I do live podcasting where people can watch and they can ask questions for whoever I'm interviewing, so it's a more interactive experience. And so it goes live on Twitter, on YouTube, on Twitch, um, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook as well. And so I wanted to create not just a podcast that people could listen to, but also give people an opportunity to have access to those I'm interviewing and be make an interactive process as well.
How was the response from that?
It's actually been really good, and I mean I've been running kind of Facebook Live shows since about 2016,
Mhm.
because I previously had another business where it was a nutrition and a supplement store, and uh, that was a really helpful part of the business because it really puts a human face to it. People see me, they see that I'm real, that I'm not just some sort of model on Instagram taking perfect pictures. Like, no, I'm just a human being, like, who I really want to help people, and I'm really good at doing it. And so it's I think it's neat to get that, what would I say, like that sort of like that peek behind the curtain. So on TV
Yeah.
you would watch somebody be interviewed and there's no way to interact with them, but now you can watch somebody be interviewed, an expert, and you can interact with them. You can ask questions. I can, publish the questions on screen so your question can be seen and get answered in real time. So it's this really neat experience, and I really love it.
Any guests that really jumped out at you like, "Oh, that was awesome. That was an awesome experience?"
Yeah. So the latest published episode is with a lady named Gregory Ann Cox, and she has one heck of a story. She's over 50, and she runs a company called Rebellious Wellness Over 50. Um, I was on her podcast, but it was when I brought her onto my podcast to interview her that I started to learn more about her story. I was like, wow. So, like her mom passed from pancreatic cancer when she was around, I think, 19. And it was really kind of how she found out about it was really sort of traumatic because it was hidden from her until it was too late to hide it anymore. You couldn't hide it anymore. And so she had turned to, things like drugs and alcohol and partying and stuff like that, and not taking care of her health and getting to some disordered eating and so on. And to go from that to being like, she's wonderfully wise and intelligent. Like, she's actually just a really special lady. And I'm a big fan of hers. And so to be able to listen to her tell her story, like, I love a story like that because it gives us hope. We go, here was this person who she struggled with disordered eating. She used sometimes illicit substances that were commonly being used back in the 80s, anyways, but
Mhm.
all to deal with the things that she didn't know how to deal with. And then she tells how along the way, she met somebody who accepted her for who she was and didn't make any demands of her to change or to look different or so on and so forth. And that really created this shift. And she started to turn more care towards herself. And I mean, so yeah, she's just this really remarkable lady that I'd love to bring her back on the show sometime.
Well, it sounds like a very interesting podcast. I gotta check out more of your episodes. I listened to a few already, but I gotta
Thank
check
you.
more of
Yeah.
them out and more of your episodes and stuff like that. Well, wrapping up, final thoughts. Anything you wanna leave with, a new dad or a person who's struggling with their weight?
I would say be kind towards yourself. we don't use compassion a lot, especially as males, but understand that compassion is not a get out of jail free card. In other words, it's not meant to excuse bad behavior, but we can say, hey, you know what? Like, you don't have to be Superman. You don't have to do it all. And what really starts the change is just starting to become aware of your behaviors. So if you know that a behavior is not helping you and you're struggling to break it, um, connect to why you would want to change that behavior. And very often it's going to be your kids that are going to inspire you to want to change. I want to, exactly this. Like I said, I love the name of your podcast, No Sit on the Sideline, Dad. That even just the title of your podcast has inspired me. I've used that phrase more than once in talking publicly. And that's really it. Just make little changes. You don't have to tackle everything all at once. Little changes over time add up to create a big transformation.
Also, when they get connected, they want to reach out, find more about your program, more about you, or ask any questions.
You can go to freedomnutritioncoach.com and you can learn a little bit more about Lifestyle 180. You can see some of my client testimonials, the results that I've produced for people. As you've already mentioned, the Wellness Unplugged podcast. If you'd like to see it live and be a part of the interactive experience, you can check it out, Freedom Nutrition Coaching on YouTube, No FN Diets on Twitter. Where else do I publish it? Freedom Nutrition Coaching on LinkedIn, or you could just send me a friend request on Facebook. So I think we'll put the links in the show notes anyways. But yeah, if anybody wants to catch that live and interact, I'd love it.
What was your Twitter handle again?
No FN Diets.
I like that. That was really cool. I had to ask. I'm like, I thought I heard it right, but I guess that's that's what. Jonathan, all links will be all the links will be in the show notes for this episode. Thank you for your time. I really do appreciate it. It was a very fun conversation.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.